Hello everyone, since this is your first major public examination and English language is your first paper, you may naturally feel a bit nervous. Don't worry, in today's session, I'm going to give you some tricks as to how to deal with the composition section. Thank you Mr. MKS for this request. How to write a perfect narrative essay. Arrange events in chronological order and you may use flashbacks, the technique of flashback, recalling of earlier events, and also fast forward, events that happened later than the point up to which the narrator has reached in his narration. Use words like first, second, next, now, finally, at last, consequently, in spite of, soon, after a few days, and so on. Description of place and people is necessary to continue the theme, and this will add variety and interest. This will make your narrative composition interesting. There is a role of time, place and setting also in such compositions. Time, place and setting create the right mood, proper atmosphere and a sense of reality. And what is the most important point of a narrative composition? The manner in which the narrator describes and relates his experiences. And this means that you will have to add a personal touch. Example of a narrative composition: the happiest moment or the most embarrassing moment. You will have to restrict the tense to past continuous and simple past. So this is a little about narrative essay, and now let me just discuss a few points about descriptive essay. How will you write a descriptive composition that gives a detailed account of a particular place, thing or particular people? The description can be real or imaginary, but you must present your thoughts and ideas clearly and vividly. And what will you do in order to describe a scene? Give description of location, a general impression, and then move on to the particular aspects. Include colors, shapes, familiar sounds, smells in relation to the subject. And how will you do it? Use figures of speech, use descriptions of the senses, sense of touch, sense of smell, imagery. Use images and symbols in order to include colors, shapes, the familiar sounds and smells around you. Include your personal impression and reaction at the end. Mention any memory that the scene has evoked in you. Remember that this kind of composition is a word picture. Therefore, you must make the readers imagine the scene. Write in that way. This is all about the descriptive essay, a marketplace, a busy railway station, and so on. You may be asked to write about institutions, industries, occupations, scientific topics, television, computer, audio-visual media, proverbs linked with the writer's experience. So this kind of topics will come under critical composition. How will you deal with it? First, try to convey the subject matter. Make a list of main points in the introduction, and then in the body develop by discussion of the above mentioned points. And also analyze and evaluate. Focus on particular aspects after developing the points, and round off with personal views, your likes and dislikes. Use present tense in this case. An example: education for women, child labor, and so on. So this is how you're going to deal with this type of composition. Argumentative essay, the most interesting according to me. And I love argumentative essays. And I had attempted this type of essay in my Icse examination. We had the topic cigarette smoking, something related to smoking cigarettes. I had started with a quotation, with a proverb. Cigarette smoking is injurious to health. I had started the argumentative essay like this. Take a standpoint. For example, just as I told you, I had used the quotation to take a standpoint. Write either for or against the topic, against the motion. It's like a debate. But do not make the mistake of writing both for and against, for or against. This is the most important point in dealing argumentative essays. Use logical statements and valid points in order to substantiate your answer. Give examples, give case studies in order to present and justify your standpoint. Compare and contrast in the conclusion. If you are writing for the topic, write in the conclusion 1 or 2 points against it. And then in the conclusion, after everything, sum up why you are for the motion. And if you are against a particular motion, write 1 or 2 points for the motion and then compare and contrast. After this, sum up. For example, let me just discuss this with the help of an example. Use of mobile phones. Mobile phones are bad. I am speaking for this topic. I'll write about the disadvantages of mobile phones in the body, in the introduction, and then in the conclusion, I will write 1 or 2 advantages of mobile phones. But ultimately, since I am highlighting the disadvantages, I will sum up justifying my standpoint. Let's move on to short stories, and short stories must be original and you must give a title. And the narrative technique to be used, first person or third person form. You must deal with a theme in your story. There must be a message. And if you are not trying to deliver any message, you may make the story an open-ended story. They lived happily ever after. It's not necessary that you will end like this. You may add an element of suspense in the end of the story by keeping it open-ended, leaving the interpretation to the readers. This will make your story interesting. The plot must be interesting and credible, convincing. Don't just fly to moon and then to Mars and then to Venus and come back to Earth. Make your story, make the plot credible and interesting. There must be a crisis, a climax, and a resolution in your story. Now, if you are comfortable with this, then only attempt short stories. Don't write boring short stories or don't copy from anywhere. What is crisis? Complications and conflicts arise out of interaction of characters or incidents leading to a crisis. Clash of characters and incidents will lead the action to a breaking point or a turning point. And this is known as crisis. And then there is the climax, the culmination of tension, interest, and the greatest excitement in the story is felt here in the climax. And the resolution, the story must have a logical conclusion, how the crisis is to be resolved. Atmosphere and setting is also, these aspects are also very important. You may use dialogue or the techniques of flashbacks, flash forward. You must give an effective, interesting beginning and the ending must be convincing. And I'll end with the reflective composition and imaginative composition. For reflective composition, you must decide on the central idea and develop with examples and concrete illustrations. You can also quote stories and fables to support your statements, and reasoning is necessary. And if you are going to write an imaginative composition like the autobiography of a coin, if I were the president of my country, how will you write? There must be a beginning, a middle, and an end, a development of events, adventures, misfortune, and ending with the present state of existence. And you will have to use first person in this case, as the writer has to put himself in the place of the person or the animal or the object of imagination.